All right, Hans Temestode, FightHype.com, here with Steven Espinoza. How you feeling, brother?
I'm good, man. All things considering.
Is it? It's a great card, but is it also a little bit? I don't know, make you a little bit poignant because it's just like it's a great card, but
without a doubt. I mean, it could have been the best card in the world. It's still going to be bittersweet. It's going to be a lot of emotions for a lot of people. People who have literally spent 20, 30 years. A lot of people who've been here since the start, since Showtime Sports started in 1986. So there's a lot of sacrifices, a lot of pride that goes into what we've done and what we've built. Seeing that sort of all go away sort of suddenly, it's going to be emotional for a lot of people. Not just because we love the sport, but we love being with each other. I mean, when you are on the road, event after event with the same group of people, you come very close, and that may be going away. So there's a lot of history, a lot of great moments that are going away. I mean, you can't literally take those away, but it's the end of a generation. It's the end of an era.
You're in like a unique situation where, I mean, if you want, you don't have to do anything, man. Like, you can retire forever. I don't want to count your money, but you got it, man. Put it like that. But you did say that if you wanted to continue, it's most likely going to be in boxing. Did you decide if you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to keep going? Or do you want to kick your feet up, relax, and say, forget this shit?
The one piece of advice that I've gotten in this period, or the best piece of advice, I've gotten lots of advice, is really not to rush the decision, and that's what I'm doing. Look, there's a big part of me that, wants to stay with the sport. That's where my heart is. Just put a lot of time, energy in it. I'm proud of the momentum we've got. I'm proud of the fighters we wanted. There's a big part of me that wants to continue that work because there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of upside left. But there are other opportunities. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff in sports generally. So I'm taking my time. I haven't made a decision yet, but I'd be lying if I didn't feel a draw to stay within the sport. It definitely is.
You've done so many great things and you've been a part of so many big shows, but there's a part of you'll have your quote-unquote haters. I don't need to name them or anything like that, but the part of you look back and say, well, maybe we could have did this a little bit better, maybe we could have did that a little bit better, or do you think it was always going to end up going like this?
You know what? Look, you can always look back. I mean, nobody's perfect, and none of the shows and things that we've done have been perfect. So I always look back, whether it's an old fight or an old deal, about things that I wish could have gone slightly better. But in terms of getting to this result, look, it's a combination of a lot of factors. We had a lot of conversations internally with senior management about this, and it really was something that was sort of out of our hands. We all know the economy's tough. We all know there's a lot of changes going on in streaming, in the media industry overall. We know Paramount as a company has been challenged. We've seen it across a lot of the media companies, programming changes, personnel cuts. And this is, quite simply, a merger happens, new leadership comes in, and they want to do things differently. And, it's not like there weren't enough pay-per-view buys, there weren't enough viewership, things like that. They're shaking things up. They considered selling BET. They tried to sell BET. BET is coming off some of the best years they've ever had. And so Showtime as a strategy has decided, look, we're not doing sports anymore. It's not a boxing decision. We're not doing sports. We're not doing documentaries. We're not doing comedy music. It's going to be a scripted programming. It's going to be a series programming. Like, that's where they want to put all their money and all their efforts. So, look, that's their prerogative. When you're senior leadership at a corporation, you get to determine strategy. Unfortunately, that means that the end of what we're doing here.
The Amazon Prime deal, pretty sure it wasn't shocking to you, I'm pretty sure, but how can this change the game, so to speak? And what do you have to say, and I have to ask you this, what do you have to say to people that would say, a lot of PBC people, I don't remember you actually saying it, but there were a lot of PBC people that used to say stuff like, I'm not putting my fighter on an app, or just kind of bashing apps, so to speak. So what did you kind of say? We just like, well, now we're on an app.
Well, I don't think it was about an app per se. I think it was an app where the audience is very limited, and I think fundamentally, I mean, a different way to ask the question is, do you want to go on an app or a service that has 500,000 subscribers, or you want to have, something with a potential audience of, 100 million subscribers? I mean, it's pretty simple.
168 to me.
So, I think at the end of it, look, I think, unfortunately in our sport, sometimes the negative voices get a lot more attention than they should. They're a lot louder than the other ones. And, I've heard it all, from, comments about me or comments about, oh, there's no money in this deal. Everyone seems to be an expert about, things that they don't know really all that much about. So it's the nature of the sport. There's always going to be opinions. People want to think that there's no money in the Amazon deal. They want to think that PBC is broke. They want to think that I wasn't a good executive. That's certainly entitled. They're entitled to their opinions. Those of us who are actually involved know that the truth is very different.
Obviously, you guys still have Crawford under your belt. He's at all the PBC shows now. He might pull up to this one. Doubt it. It's cold as hell out here. But when you look at Crawford, is it just, he has to fight Spence again. So is it just a matter of he's going to fight Spence? Canelo options right there. The boots thing he doesn't really seem to be interested in. Out of nowhere now we have Devin Haney. Do you kind of look at Devin where it's just like, I didn't really think about that. Maybe we could do something.
Yeah, well, look, he's been talking a lot about 147, and there's definitely a lot of business to be done there. It's one of the deepest divisions. So, is
that a big enough fight, you think, for a Crawford?
I think so. Look, Devin is a skilled fighter. People respond to matchups. There's part of it they also respond to individual fighters. But we all know the recipe for the big events. It's, big fighters in a great matchup. So we know if there's name fighters and popular fighters, they do a certain amount of business by themselves, and that's great. But you put those name fighters in a high quality matchup, the Mayweather Canelos, the Ryan versus Tanks, those kind of fights, the Spence Crawfords, the Benavidez, the Benavidez Andre fights. Those are the ones that that jump out even more. So sure, I don't, it's funny. Everyone's got an opinion on who's a star, how to make a star. At the end of the day, the audience is going to determine. There's no one way to make a star. You don't need a promoter talking about it all the time. I mean, that's a very old way of thinking things. You don't become a star by your promoter talking about it. If that was the case, then every fighter with a promoter would be a star. That's not, going off and giving you speeches to every boxing website about what a star guy is doesn't make him a star. The audience decides through the performance, through their charisma, on the backs of their own. So at the end of the day, the audience is going to speak, and more often than not, you'll get the matchups that you want.
Great point, and the performance that Devin just had might lean him to being a star, and we already know one of the biggest stars, maybe the second biggest, or the first or the second, depending on who you ask, is Gervonta Davis. Him and Devin have been talking a lot of shit online recently. Devin is saying, look, I'm gonna fight him, but I only want to fight him at 140, no rehydration, none of that extra stuff and whatever. And obviously that's not something that you would know right now. Business has to be handled behind closed doors. But is that the new Spence versus Crawford? Not the timeline-wise, but the biggest fight that could be made.
Yeah, it depends. It really depends on where realistically the weight classes are. Devin's going to be at 147. Then the fight's not makeable. 140, could be. It really depends. I know what is the case is what Tank's size is, and if he's in there against a guy who's 165, 170 pounds. That's a tough ask for him because there are weight classes, and then there are smaller and bigger guys within those weight classes. So, look, the weight's got to be safe. It's not about sort of anybody ducking anybody. Nobody wants to see Devin Haney weight trained and not at his best. Nobody wants to see Tank Davis fighting a guy who's 30 pounds heavier than him. So, one way or the other, it's not about ducking, it's not about avoiding, it's not about this guy's scared of that guy. It's about sort of the realities of the sport and what is actually logical and reasonable and recommendable from a health perspective.
Gotcha. And just last question on this, actually. Do you think it's a little bit unfair the way they're treating Tank, just from the standpoint of, Devin's such a big guy. He's already talking about fighting at 47. Reports said he rehydrated to 165 for the Regis fight in about 24 hours or so, something like that. And, obviously that's the fight that a lot of people want to see. Do you think it's fair for people to keep pushing that fight? Or do you think people should just be like, look, he moved up, Tank fought once at 140. Mm-hmm. He probably didn't like it. He never went back. Let's stick to matchups at 35 like Shakur, Keyshawn Davis, guys like that? Or do you think it's right? Look, you're the cash cow. You're the guy. You got to deal with guys calling you out.
I mean, look. What I don't think is fair, and I'm not just talking about Tank in general, but if a guy moves up or takes a shot, Oscar De La Hoya took a shot at 160. A couple of shots at 160. Was that his natural weight? Probably not. Was Floyd naturally a 154 pounder? No. Is Canelo naturally a 175 pounder? No. But you don't penalize those guys and say, well, you did it once, so you should always be able to do it in the future, and you always should do it in the future. And if you do it once and you don't keep doing it, then we're going to say that you're ducking or you're scared. That's not it. You give credit for someone trying to push their boundaries. They decide that boundary was a little bit too far, then okay, then they're the best ones. But that doesn't mean anyone's scared or ducking or running away from a fight. It's just sort of logic.
Steven, you've been in the sport for longer than I've been born, really. So is there anybody, and not talent-wise, but is there anybody you can compare to Boots from the standpoint of, damn, this guy's good, but I can't get him a mega fight?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's becoming easier, a little bit easier, as Boots has got a name and he's got a title, and that makes a lot of things. I mean, look, the comparisons I make, and you got to take this in. I mean, there are times, he looks, like a Vernon Forrest. There's times when he looks like a Roy Jones. There are times where he looks like an Oscar De La Hoya. Is he any of those guys? No. Does he have some of the elements of the best of those guys? Absolutely. I mean, you go back and look at Roy Monvilla, and you look at the way Boots moved and sort of the angles, and it did remind me of Roy Jones. Am I saying he's Roy Jones? Not yet. He's not a Hall of Famer yet. But does he have those kinds of skills and those kinds of abilities and the ability to entertain? Absolutely. So I think, I would say, those are the three guys that come to name. Again, not saying he's Oscar, not saying he's Vernon Forrest, I'm not saying, but there's elements of those guys where you look and you say, wow, he's got a little bit of each of these guys, but he's still his own guy. I mean, Boots is still very much his own guy.
But I really meant from like a standpoint of, I don't know, this great fighter, we had him with Showtime, and it took us a while to get him like a big fight. And like, how did we do it?
I mean, look, you can. I mean, Errol went through the same thing. Errol was frustrated not getting the fights from the older guys very publicly. He finally got that opportunity. He had to go over to England to do it. He had to, fight Kell Brook in his home territory, and sometimes now Boots has got the title. That gives people an extra incentive. So I know Boots is, people are going to be, a lot of fighters are going to be hesitant to fight Boots because he is so skilled and no one's found an answer for him yet. But he'll get the big fights. I'm very confident. The title helps, and he's at the point now where there is value there. I know what the ratings are. I know what his social media traffic is. He does bring things to the table, and now it's not a case of high risk, high reward, low reward. He's very much high risk, high reward.
Got it. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Okay, you got it.